But I want to start, because you're known as one of the world's big thinkers, I want to start with some big theme stuff. And I guess there's no bigger theme than evolution itself. And I think I'd ask a question like this. What do we know now about where we've come from? And what don't we know?
OK. We know once you've got a self-replicating entity, which nowadays is DNA, but it wasn't originally, once you've got life started, once natural selection, Darwinian natural selection has got going, then we pretty much understand the 4 billion year history of what's given rise to us and all other living creatures. We don't know how it started, and that's still a mystery, and it may always be a mystery, because it happened a very long time ago, and we may never know exactly what did happen. We know the kind of thing it had to be.
Hey, stay tuned. I just wanted to let you know that at the end of this video of Richard Dawkins and Piers Morgan talking, I'm going to be giving some of my thoughts and even suggestions at the end of this conversation. All right, let's keep going.
We don't know how it started, and that's still a mystery, and it may always be a mystery, because it happened a very long time ago, and we may never know exactly what did happen. We know the kind of thing it had to be.
What kind of thing do you think it was?
It was the origin of a self-replicating molecule, a molecule that makes copies of itself. DNA is such a molecule, but the original one was almost certainly not DNA, because DNA is what's been called a high-tech replicator. There had to be a precursor to DNA. Something, the laws of chemistry gave rise to a molecule which had this unusual property of making copies of itself, which mutated, changed in random ways, and that gave rise to competition between rival versions of it, and that gave rise to the whole panoply of life eventually.
OK, so I'm a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic, so I'm a religious person, which I know is anathema to you, and we'll come to that. But my arguments with atheists, historically, have always come down to one thing, and maybe you've got an answer which will persuade me of the folly of my ways, which is this. What was there at the start?
We don't know. But I don't know, and you don't know.
But no human brain, unless you want to correct me, can actually comprehend nothingness, right?
No, but it's a fallacy to think that because I don't understand how it happened, therefore God did it. I mean, that's just weak.
Well, no, OK, but I'm prepared to have an open mind about this.
Yes.
But somebody did. And I just have never met a human brain that can explain to me what happened before, say, you go for the Big Bang argument. What was there before? What does nothing look like?
Physicists are debating this. I'm not a physicist, but they're debating it. My point is that they don't know, and I don't know, and you don't know, and it doesn't help to postulate a God that did it.
But you're certain it's not a God, and yet you admit you don't know.
No, I'm certain that it doesn't help to postulate something very complicated at the outset, because what we've got is primeval simplicity, and from that stems everything. And what science does, it starts with simplicity, which is relatively easy to understand, and from that it develops into the whole of the universe and the whole of life. It doesn't help to start with complexity, and a creator has to be complex, whatever else he is.
The reason that I subscribe to the theory that there must be a more powerful being out there than anything the human race has created is because, like I say, a human brain can't comprehend nothingness or what may have come before nothingness. We can't. We're not able to extrapolate what that is, right? I mean, no scientist can explain nothingness, can they? Plausibly.
Well, maybe they can't. You'd have to talk to a physicist. But even
Could you explain it?
No, I'm not a physicist. But
but you're a very smart guy, and you're a very vehement atheist.
No, I'm not. I'm not that vehement.
Well, you're pretty vehement. I mean, you just think all belief in all gods is ludicrous, right?
I think that it doesn't help to introduce complexity at the outset. That's my point.
No, I get that, but
no, well, I don't think you do get it.
Well, no, I do, because but you're asking me to consider that my own belief in a deity that may be above human thinking and understanding and brain power, that was there universally, that my theory is scientifically flawed, whereas I would throw back at you, OK, but I need to be given an alternative. I need some scientist somewhere to explain to me, right, 4 billion years, all right, but then what was there before that?
Well, scientists can't answer that, and what they say is things like it's like going to It's like going north of the North Pole. I'm sure, I gather you recently introduced Stephen Hawking. He probably said that to you.
Yeah, he did actually, yeah.
But the point is this. Science can explain things starting with simplicity and working up to complexity.
No, I get that, but where science can't explain something, i.e. in the case I just gave you, is it not possible that you're all wrong on the atheist side of the argument?
We could be all wrong. But what...
And you might get a shocking surprise one day when you're no longer with us.
You might.
And you discover we were right all along.
It's possible.
Do you concede it's possible?
It's highly unlikely.
You don't know, though, do you?
No, of course I don't. Scientists take a pride in admitting what they don't know. And they don't know what happened before the Big Bang. They don't even admit that the word before means anything with respect to the Big Bang. Physicists will tell you.
But it has to. I mean,
Well, it doesn't, because that's a naive statement. Physicists will say that you do not have to say there was a time began at the Big Bang, is what some physicists will say.
Yeah, but to which I immediately respond with my basic human brain. Well, OK, if time began, when did it begin?
Well, quite.
And what was there before?
Quite.
Which is a fairly obvious question.
It is a very obvious question. It's too obvious, and physicists will tell you that you're being naive.
Yeah, but they don't know why I'm being naive, because they can't provide any actual scientific evidence.
As you've just said, the human brain is not capable of grasping
Right, that's my
things.
point. So why is it not possible that there is a superior being, power, which many people believe in different ways?
It's possible there are fairies at the bottom
God.
of the garden. I mean, all sorts of things are possible. You can't deny that.
Well, except I've never seen fairies at the end of the garden, have you?
No, you've never seen God either.
No, but you don't know for sure that either doesn't exist.
No, I don't know that fairies don't exist. Fairies may be leprechauns, for all I know.
Do you accept... Have you got milder about this as you've got older?
Yes.
Have you got more accepting that you may be wrong? Less certain?
Well, yes, of course, a scientist may always be wrong, and that's definitely a thing that a scientist has to say. But I'm not vehement. You're provoking me to be vehement because you're taking that tone with me.
Well, you've been provoked before.
Yes.
And you've been quite vehement in response. I'm actually not trying to provoke you. I'm genuinely curious.
Yes.
Because I don't have all the answers, but I'm always sceptical of people who think they do. I don't think you do.
Absolutely not.
But your admission that you don't have all the answers, to me, is quite interesting, because it lends the possibility you might be wrong.
Well, it's not interesting. I mean, no scientist has all the answers. But the one thing you shouldn't say is that because I don't know, therefore God did it. That's a
What do you think happens when you die?
As Bertrand Russell said, I believe that when I die, I shall rot, and nothing of my ego shall remain.
That's it.
Yes.
The end. Nothing. There's nothing else.
How could it be otherwise? I mean, you have a brain, an evolved brain, which works by nerve impulses, and when that decays, what could possibly be left?
So you don't believe in, for example, a spirit or a soul? None of that is... That's all conditional entirely on a link to an actual cerebral...
Yes, if by spirit or soul you mean something that outlasts the brain, then I do not believe in it, no.
Really?
Well, how could I?
All right, so one of the first things that came to my mind listening to them speak was that atheists very often, they make the mistake of thinking that creationists are not arguing from evidence or science, but we really are. We're arguing from the same set of data that the materialist is arguing from. And also Richard Dawkins says that atheists or materialists, they take pride in saying that they simply don't know. And I would say the same is very true for the creationists as well. We also take pride and are humble enough to say there's some things that we do not know. But also, as a creationist, we can also take pride in many things that we can't explain, that the naturalistic explanation simply cannot explain. So like I said, we're arguing from the same set of information. It's not like creationists have their own little category of scientific investigation and atheists do over here. No, it's the same collective information that's being gathered, and there's conclusions that are made based on the evidence that is presented. That's something that I learned from a gentleman named Stephen C. Myers from his book, The Return of the God Hypothesis. One of the things that he says is inference to the best explanation. This is known scientifically, it's known in detective work, and what this inference to the best explanation looks like is, for instance, a detective, he goes to a crime scene. He evaluates all the evidence that is laid out and presented before him. He starts to form different theories or hypotheses of what could be the most likely explanation to this set of evidence that I have here. And based upon that evidence, what you do is you form a conclusion of what the most likely explanation is. You may have more than one explanation, but then that's when you got to look at the probability of how much does this explanation answer in comparison to this, and how much of this explanation is rational. So therefore we get to a conclusion of what is the most likeliest interpretation of the evidence that we collectively have. So when we're arguing, that being the creationists and the atheist, when we're arguing from a set of data or making a conclusion, we're doing so from the same box or from the same source of scientific evidence. So when the materialist says, I do science, the creationist could also say, well, I do science as well. When you get into some of the weeds and some of the theories of these hypotheses, and you compare a creationist interpretation versus an atheist interpretation, sometimes some arguments are just better than the other. And this is true for both sides. But in general, I really do believe that the evidence that we see from the same source of scientific investigation and empirical knowledge that we have, I really do believe that creationism is the more likely explanation to help us answer the question of where we came from. Like, for instance, let's compare the evidence for the beginning of the universe and it beginning to exist. Okay, this points to a spaceless, timeless, and immaterial being, potentially being one of the most likely explanations. I'm not saying the only, but the most likely and rational. What's the atheistic interpretation in comparison to answer the beginning of time? Well, Richard Dawkins himself will go to the multiverse, which is, statistically, and we're talking about rationally and logically, is the most irrational and implausible conclusion or explanation compared to the evidence that we just simply see that the universe began to exist. And it makes sense that something outside of it had to create it. And when you look at the intelligent design in our DNA, in our biology, the fine-tuning of the universe, the fundamental constants, it makes sense that this is a mind, okay? It's not like we're so irrational for coming to this conclusion. Now, we're not saying for certain this is the case, but what we are saying is it looks very likely. Now, unfortunately, me commenting here, it doesn't give us time to go very deep into some of the conversations that need to be had, but at the end of the video, I'm going to link one of my earlier videos that I did pertaining to DNA replication and how it does suggest or imply that there is a designing mind at work here. Now, one of the other things that I thought about was Albert Einstein and kind of his process of forming different conclusions and coming to different opinions in relation to the universe, where at first he believed it was a static and eternal universe, and then he ended up forming a conclusion where he believed that the universe was no longer, based on the evidence, that the universe was no longer static as he realized the expansion of the universe. And he also came to a conclusion and a realization through empirical evidence that the universe had a finite beginning. This is something huge, and it really does entail and point to a lot of designing mind and intelligent design that we don't have the time to get into, but maybe I'll do a separate video or something relating to Albert Einstein's realizations and his big blunder that is so famously known. All right, so I just wanted to shed some light on this whole thing that materialists say, I just do science. Well, again, so do creationists. We're arguing from the same set of data, and we use inference to the best explanation to form a logical explanation that can be logically explained. All right, so now in closing, this is a biblically based channel. And with that being said, I would like to challenge other world beliefs or even introduce them into the conversation to be had on a deeper level and to think critically and deeper, even to myself, Brandon. Like, why do you believe in what you believe in? Why are you taking this step-by-step methodical process of this particular belief that you have about this particular thing? So all are welcomed, and if you enjoy the channel, I really just like that, I guess, because I want to encourage people to think critically and challenge them. So with that being said, it's biblically based, and let me close with a scripture. Hebrews 11:3. It says, "It is by faith that we believe the universe was formed at his command, so that what is seen was not made by what is visible." So this is what I was saying in the beginning, that the universe began to exist, which logically does imply through a rationalistic interpretation that can be made that something spaceless and timeless and immaterial did the creating. All right, have a good day.